Elena and Darius were the last survivors of what had once been a thriving human colony on a distant, habitable world. The planet, so rich in resources and teeming with potential, had been chosen as the site for a new beginning, far from the deteriorating conditions on Earth. The settlers who had arrived decades earlier had brought with them not just hope and ambition, but also the latest technologies, dreams of a fresh start, and a determination to create a utopia among the stars. The colony began with great optimism. They had come together, a diverse group of farmers, engineers, scientists, and visionaries, all working side by side to build a new life on this alien world. At first, everything had seemed perfect. The fertile land provided abundant crops, the climate was temperate, and the waters were rich with fish. The settlements grew rapidly, becoming small cities with schools, hospitals, factories, and research facilities. For the people of the colony, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. They built a thriving community where individuals were free to follow their dreams, and where the lessons of Earth's past mistakes seemed distant and irrelevant. But like many human endeavors, the promise of the colony was doomed to unravel. It began subtly, with a strange illness that spread among the population. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a seasonal flu, something that could be easily treated with the colony's advanced medical technology. However, the disease quickly escalated into something far worse. It seemed to mutate rapidly, spreading from person to person with frightening efficiency. No one knew where it had come from or why it was so deadly. Within weeks, the once vibrant population began to dwindle. The disease spared no one, regardless of age, gender, or status. And those who did survive were left weakened, unable to continue their work, their hope shattered. As the death toll climbed, the colony's leaders scrambled to find a solution, but it was too late. The once bustling cities became ghost towns, their streets empty and silent. Families were torn apart, and the settlers who remained tried desperately to flee, seeking safety in the wilderness or in the farthest reaches of the colony's outposts. But the planet itself seemed to turn against them. As the disease took its toll, the survivors found themselves unable to escape the devastation. The disease spread faster than they could respond, and the colony's infrastructure, once so carefully crafted, collapsed under the weight of the pandemic. It was in the midst of this chaos that Elena and Darius found themselves separated from the others. Elena, just a young girl when the colony fell, was living with her family in one of the smaller settlements. She had grown up in a world full of promise, surrounded by the comforts of modern technology. But when the disease arrived, it swept through the settlement with horrifying speed. She lost her parents and siblings one by one, and with their deaths, Elena found herself alone. Forced to flee as the settlement became a toxic wasteland, she wandered the wilderness, unsure of where to go or how to survive. She became accustomed to the solitude, learning to rely on her wits, her resourcefulness, and the natural world around her. She had no choice. It was her only option. Darius, on the other hand, had been part of a research team stationed on the outskirts of the colony. His team had been working on the planet's ecosystem, studying the indigenous species and attempting to map the vast forests and rivers that spanned the world. When the disease began to spread, the team was cut off from the main settlement. They had managed to set up a makeshift shelter, hoping the isolation would protect them. But as the disease spread relentlessly, Darius lost all but one of his fellow researchers. With no other option, he was forced to continue alone, surviving in the ruins of the colony, scavenging for whatever he could find. He too had been cut off from civilization, isolated in a world that had been suddenly and completely abandoned. The two had once known each other as children. Elena remembered Darius as someone she had played with in the early days of the colony, a friendly companion in a world full of possibilities. They had been part of the same community, but the collapse of the colony had forced them to part ways. As time passed, they had forgotten each other, their memories dulled by years of solitude. Elena had long given up on the idea of ever seeing another human being again. The loneliness had become a constant companion, and the world around her had transformed into a desolate landscape where nothing remained but the echoes of a lost civilization. But fate had other plans. It was during one of her scavenging expeditions that Elena first saw him. She had been exploring the ruins of the colony's central hub, searching for supplies, when she noticed a figure moving among the wreckage. At first, she thought she was imagining things. Her mind had become accustomed to the silence of the planet, the solitude that seemed to stretch out endlessly before her. But as she took a step closer, she saw him again, a man, hunched over, working with a piece of machinery. For a moment, she froze. It was Darius. Though the years had changed him, and the passage of time had left him worn and weary, there was no mistaking him. The recognition hit her like a wave, and for a brief moment, all of her grief, all of her isolation, seemed to fall away. Her heart raced as she stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. Darius had been the one person she never expected to see again, and now, here he was, standing in front of her. The years of loneliness, the pain of losing her family, the struggle to survive, all of it seemed to vanish in that single instant of recognition. But as much as she wanted to rush to him, to embrace him and hold on to the connection they once shared, something held her back. They were strangers now, two survivors in a broken world. Darius, too, was startled. He had learned to trust no one, to rely on no one but himself. The idea of encountering another human being after so many years was almost too much to comprehend. But when their eyes met, something flickered between them. It was a brief, almost imperceptible moment, a shared memory of the past, of a time when they were children together in a colony full of life and hope. Darius didn't know what to do, didn't know how to respond. The loneliness, the years of surviving on his own, had left him wary and uncertain. For a long time, they simply stood there, unsure of how to proceed. The world around them had changed so much. The colony they had once known, the life they had once shared, was now a distant memory, replaced by the harsh realities of survival. But in that silence, in that shared moment of recognition, something deep and unspoken passed between them. They weren't just two people who had happened upon each other by chance, they were the last remnants of something far greater. Together, they were the final echoes of a once thriving civilization. Slowly, over the course of days and weeks, Elena and Darius began to rebuild the world they had known. It wasn't easy. There was still so much loss, so much pain, and so much to be done. But they worked together, learning from each other, relying on each other. Elena's knowledge of the planet's natural resources helped them find food and shelter, while Darius' engineering skills allowed them to repair the old technologies that still hummed with life. They were two halves of a whole, each bringing something vital to their new partnership. It wasn't just the physical work that drew them together, it was the quiet moments they shared as they worked side by side. At night, they would sit by a fire, talking softly about the past. They spoke of the colony, of the people they had lost, and of their hopes for the future. There was pain in those conversations, yes, but also healing. They had both experienced the devastation of losing everything they had once known, and yet, in each other, they found a connection that transcended that loss. As the days turned into weeks and months, their bond deepened. What began as a tentative partnership soon became something more. They found themselves drawn to each other, not just as survivors, but as people who had rediscovered something they thought was lost: love. It was not the explosive, fiery kind of love that people often talk about. It was quiet, steady, and patient. It was the kind of love that had been forged through shared experience and mutual respect. It was a love that grew out of the ashes of their grief, a love that was rooted in the simple, everyday moments they shared as they rebuilt their world. In the long, silent nights, as they sat by the fire, they spoke of their dreams for the future. They talked of children, of a new generation that would grow up in a world that was still recovering from the past. They spoke of creating a new colony, one that would be different from the one that had fallen. They dreamed of a place where people could live in harmony with the land, where the mistakes of the past could be learned from, not repeated. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that the challenges they faced were immense. But together, they felt a renewed sense of hope. They had each other, and they had a future to build. Their love became the foundation of everything they did. It gave them the strength to keep going, to keep rebuilding. It was a love that endured, even in the darkest of times. And as they worked together, hand in hand, they proved that even in the face of destruction and loss, there was still hope. There was still a chance for a new beginning. And in the quiet, steady way that love had taken root between them, Elena and Darius found not only each other, but a new world to call their own, a world where love, hope, and humanity could begin again.